This is Jabari Walker, and you're listening to The Briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Blizzard fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino, episode 123 of The Briefcase, presented by our friends at Spirit Mountain Casino. I'm your host, Casey Holdahl, and yet again, another light week for your Portland Trail Blazers. Played a game on Sunday, not playing a game again until Thursday. Very similar to the way it was last week. A lot of time off here in the month of December for the Trailblazers, though it hasn't resulted in any wins yet for your Portland Trailblazers. Still winless in the month of December. Most recently, coming with a 7-point loss to the Suns in Phoenix on Sunday. Blazers have been playing better, I would say, in the last week and a half, but that better play not resulting in any wins just yet. We'll see if that changes at all throughout the rest of the month of December. You would hope it would, but we're already well over halfway through the month of December, have not secured a win just yet. Hopefully sometime in the next couple weeks before we get to 2025, that will be the case. We'll talk about that in this edition as well. As I mentioned, just another light week. We'll hear from Chauncey Billups after practice on Tuesday. One of the nice things about not having many games is it does give the team quite a bit of chance to get back to the gym, get some practice in, which they have been doing. We'll hear from Chauncey about some of the things they've been working on in practice, and we'll catch up on where the Trailblazers are at in terms of their record versus the spread this season on this edition of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. As I mentioned, the Trailblazers have lost 6 straight games, most recent being a 116-109 loss to the Suns in Phoenix on Sunday at Footprint Center. 20 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals for Anthony Simons, 17 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists for Deni Avdija off the bench. The recent play of Anthony Simons and Deni Avdija, I would say, has been a couple reasons for optimism for this team right now, even though they're not able to get any wins out of those performances. 17 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals for Jeremy Grant, who also had a great third quarter versus the Spurs. Trailblazers ended up losing that game as well last Friday. I saw some mentions as well too. So Jeremy talked after the game on Friday in the loss to San Antonio, and he seemed a bit annoyed, obviously, as you would expect. I believe he scored, I think, 26 points, 22 points, something like that in the third quarter. Trailblazers have a chance to win that game versus the Spurs, end up losing it in the fourth quarter, after being up, I believe, by 17 points in the fourth quarter. And I saw some people being like, well, what's Jeremy upset about, or why is he mad? And then it's like, because they lost the game and he played well and they should have been able to win that game, or you would have hoped they would have been able to pull that game out. So you want to see guys who are kind of annoyed or upset after losses, and Jeremy definitely was after that Spurs game. And he even mentioned it, in the practice the team had in Phoenix when we arrived in Phoenix on, I guess that was Friday, no, excuse me, Saturday, that he was like, well, yeah, of course I'm not happy about it. Like, I want to win. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. And then, again, I think that's something you probably want to see from guys, is being upset or annoyed when they lose. And particularly when you've lost a lot of games consecutively, as the Trailblazers has, that's going to result in some players, particularly your more veteran players, being a little annoyed by that, which, as I mentioned, that's probably a good thing. Also in that game, the game versus Suns, it's 14 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block for Toumani Camara, playing against his former team, who he never actually played any regular season games for, but did play Summer League for, down there in Phoenix. Donovan Clingan back in the lineup, which is great news. He got the start on Sunday versus the Suns, went 5-9 from the field for 10 points to go with 9 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 blocks in 19 minutes. Getting back to that Spurs game as well, unfortunately, Donovan Clingan's streaks of blocks to begin a season or to begin a career has ended. He did not get a block in the game versus the Spurs. Though 2 things about that. One, he's on a 15-minute restriction. It's kind of a bummer that that's going to end his streak. But that's just kind of the way it goes. And also some of these streaks to, like to start a season, it's kind of interesting, but I don't know that it means a whole lot. We already know that Donovan Clingan is going to be a great shot blocker, regardless of whether or not he gets a block in every single game he plays as a rookie. We already know he's going to be really good at it. He's already really good at it now. So, while it's kind of a fun footnote, I don't think it really indicates anything larger that we don't already know, which is, again, that Donovan Clingan is going to be a great defensive player. But the other thing about that game, too, was that it was his first game back, and they had also given him a block in the first half that the NBA, or I'm assuming it's the NBA, I'm assuming it wasn't Trailblazers scorekeepers, then went back and took away and gave to somebody else. And I feel like he did have a block in the first quarter of that loss to the Spurs, and I believe the team sent tape in maybe to ask them to make sure that he didn't get it. As far as I know, they have not awarded him a block in that game versus San Antonio, so they must not have seen it. So that's kind of a bummer, but again, small kind of footnote kind of thing, though I do know that I mentioned it to Donovan. He was like, yeah, I thought I had a block in the first half. And then I had heard again that the team had gone to the NBA and said, hey, that's fine. Can we just make sure they didn't actually get a block in the first half of that game? Because, if he did, we would like him to get credit for that. And that's one of those things, too, where players always want their stats. And if you miss stats or if they think that stats got miscounted, guys are going to mention that. And I've, throughout my time with the team, have there's some players who are definitely looking at that box score closer than others and saying, "Oh no, 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 no! You only gave me 3 steals in this game. I'm pretty sure I had 4 steals in this game." And then they'll run off which ones they are. So always interesting to see kind of which guys kind of let that stuff go. Donovan didn't mention anything about it, but I know the team was lobbying on his behalf. And which guys are very adamant about, like, yeah, I want to make sure that I get my stats. And I mean, you should. Like, one, it's good for things to be accurate anyways. And two, that's how guys get paid, is off their stats a lot of times. So you don't really mind guys wanting to make sure things are accurate because, the league wants it to be accurate as well. Robert Williams III also made his return to the court in the loss to the Suns. He went 4-4, 8 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, I believe, also in 15 minutes. Rob on a minutes restriction as well, as was Donovan Clingan, as is Donovan Clingan still. I don't know that he'll still be on a minutes restriction, Donovan, by the time we get to the game on Thursday versus the Nuggets. I'm guessing it won't be as much of an issue because I think DeAndre Ayton will probably be back for that game. But either way, it'd be nice to just get him out there unfettered. I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe had a little bit more of a restriction, but it's probably a restriction that is so high at this point that if he's not starting, he's probably not going to hit it coming off the bench unless someone DeAndre has foul trouble. So either way, he's making his return and looking good doing it as well. Robert Williams III also, I will expect, will probably remain on a minutes restriction maybe for the next week or so. As you probably recall, Rob was out with a concussion, so not necessarily an issue with his knee, which has been obviously a problem throughout Rob's career. But you also, after a period of inactivity, I believe Rob was out for almost 2 weeks, if not 2 weeks. You definitely want to kind of bring him back slowly and make sure that that knee is responding well to an increase in load when he hadn't had much for the last 2 weeks as he's going through the concussion protocol. So I expect he'll probably remain on a minutes restriction as well. But again, and as we'll hear from Chauncey Billups here in a minute, you're probably not getting Rob out there for as many minutes as you would like anyways. So the fact that he is on the minutes restriction probably doesn't matter all that much. It probably did matter a little bit in the Suns game because they probably could have used him out there for a little bit longer. But either way, really good to see him out there. He looked good doing it. He did have a fall and he kind of got up a little bit gingerly in that game versus the Suns. But I'm assuming he's not going to hit the injury report for Thursday's game. We'll know that on Wednesday afternoon. And assuming he doesn't, that will be pretty close to the Trailblazers getting their full squad back. Only Matisse Thybulle at that point will not be on in the lineup or in uniform. But as we'll hear from Chauncey here in a minute, that might be changing here sooner rather than later as well. As I mentioned, the DeAndre Ayton has not played in the last 2 games due to illness, but he was at practice on Tuesday, and I imagine he will play in the game versus the Nuggets on Thursday, as well as making the trip. I do not believe he made the trip to Phoenix. I suspect he will play in the game versus the Nuggets, and I suspect he will make the trip to both San Antonio and Dallas, where the Trailblazers will be playing 2 games right before the Christmas holiday. So something to pay attention to there, hopefully. But yeah, as I mentioned, once again, hopefully able to get all their players back in the lineup. It'd just be nice to have everyone out there all at the same time and see how they look and see kind of what changes Chauncey might be able to make, or if he's going to make any changes. That was actually something I wish I would have asked in practice today that perhaps I'll ask at practice on Wednesday, is that, if they continue to lose, does that prompt a change in the lineup? I don't know that they have a whole lot of different directions to go in terms of who they're starting. I think you could probably consider, like, do you need to get Denny back in the starting lineup? He started the season as a starter, went to the bench, and has performed well on the bench since then. Does he need to be getting more minutes? Do you make up a change at the guard positions? Do you try to get Scoot back in the starting lineup? Scoot Henderson back in the lineup after missing a couple games with that thigh contusion. Do you try to get him out there more? As we'll hear from Chauncey in a minute, do you try to get Rion out there more? Do you try to get Chris out there more? And it's not even so much like I think these guys should be playing more, or I think this is going to result in us winning. Just more the idea that if you continue to lose, do you just try to make a change just to make a change, just to see kind of how it looks and how it plays? I don't know if that's the case, but I am a little curious how long or how many losses you can kind of string together before the coaching staff feels like there's something they need to do. Or is that not even really a concern about this team this season? And I could see that being a possibility as well. And that, yes, you'd like to win more games. You always want to win. But if they're really more concerned about development and getting better and establishing a style of play and a culture, does it really help to make changes to the starting lineup if the goal is really just to get better anyways and figure out what you have with some of these guys. I don't know. But I do also kind of just wonder sometimes if the team continues to lose as they have. As I mentioned, I believe, I know they've lost six straight, and I believe they've lost 10 of their last 12. Do you try to do something different just for the sake of doing something different? I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's really worth doing. But again, it's one of those things that you look at the team and their schedule and where they've been and kind of some of the losses they've taken as of late, and some of those to very good teams and some of those to teams that are about where the Trailblazers are in the standings. You lose to the Jazz, you lose to the Spurs, um, you lose to the Lakers. These are teams that are not that much ahead of you, or in the case of the Jazz, are behind you in the standings. So, do you make some kind of change just to make something, just shake things up, just to see if you can find some success, just trying something different, even if you kind of like what you've been doing. Um, Again, I don't really suspect that's going to happen, but I think it is one of those things that when you've had a hard time winning games, sometimes you just try things just to try them. Well, and as I mentioned, the Trailblazers have not won a game yet in the month of December. The only team in the NBA that has not won a game yet in December, today is December 17th. Trailblazers have, I believe, six more games in the month of December versus the Nuggets, at Spurs, at Mavs, versus Jazz, versus Mavs, and versus 76ers. Those are winnable games. I wouldn't say all of them are winnable. I mean, the Mavs have been pretty good. But again, Spurs are where you're at. You've given them tough games. The Jazz, they really put one on you. I mean, losing or winning by 40 plus points in that game about a week and a half ago. Hopefully, the Trailblazers will come out with a better spirit, as Chauncey Billups would say, in that next game versus the Jazz. You face the Mavs once again, which it's Portland's schedule is so weird this season. It feels like we're playing teams over and over and over again in stretches. Like we played the Mavs three times in 3 weeks. We played the Pelicans three times in the first 2 weeks of the season. I don't know exactly why I've decided to go that route. San Antonio is a little bit weird because that was a game that was added for the in-season tournament, but still another team that they'll end up playing twice in like 2 weeks, which there are 30 teams, so 29 other teams. You think they'd space that out a little bit more, but I guess that's just the way the schedule plays out. Not that it really has anything to do with the way Portland has performed this season, but it's just a little bit odd that they seem to have games clumped up against teams this season for whatever reason. As I mentioned, six of those games left winless so far in the month of December. They have their 16th in offensive rating in the month of December, which is better than their offensive rating throughout the season. Again, Chauncey Billups is going to talk about this here in a minute from practice on Tuesday, and that the offense has seemed to have been better as of late. 16th is, I believe, at least 10 points or 10 spots better in offensive rating than they've been in the season overall. But however, whenever they seem to do better offensively, it seems to have a negative outcome on their defense. And that is the situation we're in right now in the month of December, in that they are 29th in defensive rating in the month of December. So 16th in offensive rating in December, 29th in defensive rating, has resulted in 0 wins for the Trailblazers. And if you look at kind of where they rank throughout the month of December, and granted it's 6 games, so it's a bit of a small sample size, but you kind of try to figure out like, well, why haven't they won a game yet? Or what are other teams doing that the Blazers aren't doing right now that are resulting in wins? And it's a bit tough to tell. I mean, they're not defending especially well. As I mentioned, when you're 29th in defensive efficiency, that means that, there's only one team that's defending worse than you in those 6 games. As I mentioned, you look at their schedule, they've played some teams that they can win games against. It's like it hasn't been a murderer's row of the top teams in either conference thus far. So it's not really a schedule thing. A lot of the games have been at home. They haven't had a lot of road games recently, though a lot of the games they've lost that have been by a large margin this season have been at home. So I don't know if they're playing better on the road than at home. I haven't really noticed that, but I guess it's always a possibility. But either way, still winless in the month of December, and that's a bummer. Hopefully, get some wins here in the holiday season. And this is going to be my unsolicited advice that even if they are losing games, Trailblazer tickets do make great gifts. And I know that at the Moda Center, Rip City Clothing Co., there's some great stuff in there as well for the Trailblazer fan in your life. So if you're still looking for gifts for Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, consider tickets. Consider something from the Rip City Clothing Co. Trailblazers.com, and at the Moda Center as well. Some pretty good stuff, and there's pretty good discounts as well. But when you're not winning games, it's maybe a little more difficult to give some of those gifts. So Trailblazers, nothing else. Help the folks out who are trying to get people gifts during the holiday season. Trailblazers gift during the holiday season by winning some of these games, make them feel better about some of those purchases. Because you don't want to give someone a gift and then have to be like, oh yeah, we're on a 10-game losing streak, but hope you like the tickets. So hopefully Trailblazers are able to, as I mentioned, get in the gym, get some practice in, maybe figure some things out, and hopefully get some victories here in the month of December before the calendar turns to 2025. And at that point in time, the Trailblazers begin the season with an extended road trip, one of their longest road trips of the season. Starts in LA versus the Lakers and then heads to the Eastern Conference, if I'm not mistaken, with some pretty difficult teams as well. So if they're not able to get some of these wins in December while they're going to be at home, it's going to get a whole lot more difficult to get some of those wins on the road, you would assume, though, as I mentioned, maybe the Blazers play better on the road than at home sometimes either way. I don't know why that would be the case, but maybe that's true. Who's to say? Either way, need to get some wins here in the month of December before this thing wraps up. And since we're already halfway through the month of December, which means that 2024 is almost over, leading into 2025, and if you're still looking for something to do to start your 2025, consider ringing in the new year at Spirit Mountain Casino at the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory New Year's Eve celebration, the ultimate casino New Year's Eve celebration. Whether you're looking for a night of thrilling entertainment or a festive escape, Spirit Mountain Casino Resort is the perfect destination for your New Year's Eve travel plans. Join the folks at Spirit Mountain Casino for an evening of fun with drink specials, gaming action, and the traditional countdown at midnight. You can get ready to move to the beats at the dance party hosted by Z100 and DJ Fatboy. Shout out to Z100. Good morning, Zoo. Happening in the event center from 10 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. with free entry and exciting party favors. This is one of the best casinos for your New Year's Eve dance celebration. Dance your way into 2025 at Spirit Mountain Casino and Grand Ron on Highway 18. You can sip on expertly crafted New Year's Eve drinks with our drink specials at Amore or at the Mountain View Sports Bar, designed to keep the party going all night long. Plus, enjoy their gaming floor. You can always enjoy the gaming floor. Always nice to start the year with some wins. With a wide selection of your favorite games, perfect for adding a little luck to your new year. Start your new year out with a little bit of luck. Hit the craps tables, hit the slots, play some blackjack. It's always a great time. Fantastic. I love casinos, by the way, too. I love spending time at casinos. You can make this New Year's unforgettable by hitting up the Spirit Mountain Casino New Year's celebration in Grand Ronde. Gather your group, book your stay, and get ready for a celebration you'll never forget. If you are going to go to Spirit Mountain Casino for New Year's, consider booking a room as well. Stay the night, party well into the morning, and then begin your New Year's also at Spirit Mountain Casino. Maybe lay a few bets, some college. I think there are bowl games that day or whatever the playoff is. It's impossible to tell in college football these days, but either way, plenty of stuff to do at Spirit Mountain Casino to start your 2025. Spirit Mountain Casino, elevate your game. Well, with so much time off, plenty of time to practice, as I mentioned, the Trailblazers taking Monday off, having practiced on Tuesday and Wednesday after having multiple consecutive practices last week as well. This practice, we heard from Chauncey Billups. We get an update on Matisse Thybulle, who has not played yet this season, but it sounds like he's nearing a return. Maybe by 2025, we'll get Matisse out there. It would be fantastic for the Trailblazers and for Matisse. We'll also hear from Chauncey about what the team is working on compared to what they were working on last week. As I mentioned, a lot of time off last week, getting some practices, doing some different things this week at practice. I think obviously when you have this much time off, you can address multiple things. That's something Chauncey Billups and his staff have wanted to do, and that's what they've done at practices this week. He also gives some thoughts about Shaedon Sharpe's recent play this season, whether there are players, as I mentioned, that he'd like to get more minutes to that he just can't seem to find minutes for, and just his thoughts on the team's three-point shooting this season as well. Here's Chauncey Billups after practice on Tuesday at the team's facility in Tualatin.
So with DA here, you have everybody but Tease now, right?
Yeah, yep, pretty much.
How's
pretty
Tease
much. Tease is actually doing pretty good. He's starting to get on the court. It's a slow grind though. He isn't working out on the court yet hard, but it's just good to see him in two shoes, to be honest with you, and walking around. So he's starting to do some standstill shooting, but no moving really.
After having so much time off last week, is it kind of the similar things you're working on this week? Are there different topics you're trying to address?
No, a little different this week. We've had some slippage in a couple areas that I think it's always good to have some practice time. So yeah, we're working on a couple of different things this week.
Talk about what those areas were that you had slippage in.
I feel like our ball pressure has been down and our crashing has been down. Those are two things that's kind of who we are, It's just so crazy because our offense has been so poor most of the way, but the last few games our offense has gotten so much better, but our defense goes down. So just balancing it out a little bit.
With the offense, outside of playing selfless and sharing the ball, what are some specific things you want to see with execution over the next few weeks to keep trying to turn a corner?
Well, I think, obviously, I always think that, when we can get stops and we can rebound the ball, playing with more pace and more space. I think that when we have the space that we need, we can see the gaps to get to the point of the paint, and then that's what kind of creates our chase and our actions and stuff. So, we've been doing a pretty good job of it. I mean, we had 30 assists in the Phoenix game and created so many. 40 catch-and-shoot threes is an enormous number. We were able to do that. We just didn't shoot it great. But just continuing to be better at those things, on the offensive end, and just getting organized sooner, which will help our effectiveness.
Before Shaedon started being bothered by the core last year, he had a crazy stretch, and I keep waiting for them to have that again. What's holding him back from getting back to that level of play?
He had that stretch he had was a really awesome stretch. But you always got to consider the fact that, we were so many players down. We were playing through him. He was shooting it all the time. Now we pretty much got all of our guys. His usage will be a little different. Even though I'm always telling him doesn't matter who's out there, just attack and play hard and get to the rack and do what you do. But he's such a selfless guy. He sees those guys out there and he's just they're open though. Let me just pass it to him, even though I might be able to get to the rack. I want him to start being a little bit more selfish, if you will, to get to that rack. And then if it's not available at the rack, you make the right play. But at least attack first, see what's there. And I think that right there alone, will help him out, But Shaedon's still a very, very young player, and he had a good stretch here this year too. And he started seeing everybody's number one defender. He started seeing traps here and there, coverages and stuff that he's just not ready. He's not ready to see yet.
So does that speak to the drop in efficiency? Because it's one thing not to have the volume. It's one thing not to score 30. It's another thing to score 17, but you're shooting 33%.
Yeah, I think when you get in these teams, building their game plan around you, there's an adjustment that has to be made, and you have to start to get better at reading those things and negating those coverages. And that, I think, is kind of where Shaedon's at. And the league kind of knows how dangerous he is when he can get going. So try not to let that happen,
You talk to him about this a lot? Have you got conversations where he's saying to you, damn, coach, I've never seen that before?
Yeah. He does. He's saying, it was a little easier earlier, And I said, yeah. Until you was averaging, 28 a game, And so you start seeing different coverages and stuff. So we talk about it. We'll watch it. We'll talk about what to do in this situation. But then being out there is just a totally different thing.
I know this probably isn't too much of a concern with injuries, but is there anyone on the team that you feel like you'd like to get more minutes to, but you just can't necessarily seem to find them?
To be honest, I always feel bad for Chris Murray and Roops because they're in a tough spot and they do every single thing I ask them to do. They're the perfect dudes. The way we want to play, offensively, they do it all perfect. And those are the guys that are a lot of times on the outside, of the rotation, just by way of, they're just so young and we got some experience out there and we got guys, So those guys, those are the guys that should be mad at me, to be honest with you, because they deserve to play and they do it all right. And I just try to keep encouraging them to keep doing that, keep doing the right things. I see it. I understand it's just the way of the NBA, the way of team sports. It just happens sometimes. And then, when we're healthy with all three of our centers, I'm always wishing that I could play Rob more. I'm even trying to find ways to play him with another center because he's such a game changer, So it's great problems to have, man. I haven't had those problems here since I've been here, So me navigating that as well is not easy. I'm adjusting to that as well.
With Chris and Rayon, has there been any talk of having them go down to the remix at all to get some reps since they're not really in the rotation?
I haven't we haven't talked about it yet. because there's so many times like right now where there's so much practice time that you can get, and there's so much experience that they can get, from this. So we haven't talked about it as much.
Back to the topic of three-point shooting, it's not necessarily back to the topic of three-point shooting. It's not a collective strength for this team right now, but it's so important in today's game. When you're coaching and game planning, how do you try to work that balance of getting enough threes, but still trying to get looks that you guys can make?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, you just try to create the threes. You try to create the catch and shoot threes. And then some nights we'll shoot the heck out of it, and some nights we won't. That's something that you can't control. So I'm more concerned with how we get our shots and where they come from. And whether we make them or not, we can't control that part. That's not something that I can control. So I'm more concerned with what happens, how we get to it, the type of shots we're shooting, the type of shots we settle for. That's the only things that I can really have a little control over,
Thanks, Coach.
All right.
So there you go, Chauney Billups after Tuesday's practice in Tualatin. And yeah, I thought it was interesting, particularly, and that's the stuff about Rayon and Chris and Rob Williams and wanting to get those guys more minutes and those guys doing all the right things, but they're just veteran guys in front of them. The reason I asked that was because, I was just thinking like, what are they going to do if this losing streak extends out to 8 games? What if it gets to 10 games? What if it gets to 12 games? What if they don't win a game in the month of December? At that point, do you just start throwing minutes at other guys just to see if there's anything that you might be able to get out of them? And we saw that with Delano this year, like Delano Banton's not playing hardly any minutes. They're not playing well versus the Suns. Chauncey's just like, hey, I'm just going to put Delano out there and see what he can do. I'm not getting what I want to get out of the guys tonight anyways. Let's see what Delano can go out there and do. He goes out, has a great game, comes out, has a really nice game the next game, and then he's in the rotation. And that wouldn't have happened if Chauncey hadn't just decided like, hey, I don't think some of these guys got it tonight. I'm going to try to see if someone else does. And so, if this losing streak continues, I'm wondering if he kind of takes that same approach to guys like Chris Murray, guys like Rayon Repair, guys like Rob Williams III. Now, Rob, I think, is probably a different case because of the injury history and wanting to not necessarily throw a ton of minutes at him. But he, as Chauncey mentioned, Rob is a game changer. Like when Rob gets out there, his energy and his, to use the term the kids like today's aura, kind of, it gives you something different. Like it results in a different style of play. It kind of sparks this team, I feel like. And so at a certain point, like if you're not getting the results you want, at least from a win-loss perspective, do you just try, let's just throw Robert Williams out there and let's just start Rob and play him for 25, 30 minutes and bring Donovan and DA off the bench? Do you say like, what, like, let's get a little more size out there. Let's try to get some more minutes to Chris Murray at the 2, or Rayon's had some really great shooting games and has done a really good job of kind of bringing full court pressure. Maybe we get him out there as well with Tumani and see if they can kind of wreak some havoc on the defensive end. Again, it's just to a point where like I'm wondering if they're maybe just going to try to experiment with a few things, because that is what they've done this season with the remix. They, one of the approaches or one of the ideas this year for the Rip City remix was like, hey, we're going to try out some things that we just want to see if they work. And we're not necessarily going to concern ourselves too much with whether we're going to win or lose that game. We just want to get some data on whether or not some of these ideas that we have about maybe different ways to play might result in something else. And so I'm wondering if maybe at some point in time that same ethos, if not the actual like specific things they're doing at the remix, but just that notion that like, hey, let's just try a few different things and see kind of how they play out. I wonder if they'll maybe give that a shot if at some point in time they're not able to string together a few victories here. Because again, as I mentioned, we're getting through the month of December. They've lost 6 straight, 10 of 12. And, with some games coming up here versus teams they've already lost to recently. So I'm curious to see if they're going to try to make any changes just for the sake of making changes. I don't know if that's necessarily what they should do, but I think it's something to consider. And before wrapping up this edition of The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino, I wanted to get to our betting on the Trailblazers segment. As always, Trailblazers, after dropping 4 straight versus the spread, have actually won their last 2 contacts versus the spread. They were 3.5-point underdogs versus the Spurs and lost by just 2, and they were 11-point dogs to the Suns and lost by 7. Blazers are now 14, 11, and 1 versus the spread this season. However, even though they've been ahead of schedule for most of the season, starting to lose pace in terms of surpassing their season win projection of 22.5 wins. With 8 wins, Trailblazers are now 35% of the way to hitting the over after 32% of the season. So still a little bit ahead of schedule, but they've been stuck on those 8 wins for some time now. And if they go another couple games, they're going to actually be behind. So while, again, they're a little ahead of schedule right now, if you lose to the Nuggets on Thursday and if you lose to the Spurs on Sunday, then you are behind schedule, on Saturday. Once the holidays come, work weekends, it's hard to remember what day is what. But either way, if they lose to the Nuggets and lose to the Spurs, at that point in time, they will be behind schedule. So if you did get the over, you obviously want to see the Portland Trailblazers win some games and win some of these games soon. As I mentioned, still a little bit ahead of schedule, but they won't be for long if they're not able to get some of the games in the month of December. Next two of those games being the Nuggets and the Spurs. If they go the whole month without getting a victory, hopefully that does not happen. But if that does happen, at that point in time, chances of the Trailblazers hitting their over on their win projection is basically blown. So let's at least get to 2025 with a chance of hitting that over. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Thank you so much for joining me, as always. We'll be back later on this week, probably from San Antonio, since we'll be hitting the road here on Friday in the morning, and then, potentially having something to talk about in that game on Thursday versus the Nuggets. So until then, thank you for joining me. As always, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, not only The Briefcase, but the Blazers Balcony and Section 113. I'm Casey Holdahl. We'll talk to you soon. Go Blazers.
Hey, this is Chris Murray. Thank you for joining us on The Briefcase.